Okay, so thank you very much for that intro, Teo. Really appreciate it. And Bucky for inviting me to join you today. Bucky asked me to speak about how to fund your startup. And before I leap into that, I thought I should very quickly set some context as to why I'm here talking about that, who I am, what gives me the background to talk about investment. And I think that my journey to helping startups raising investment is perhaps not a standard one. Originally, I was a marketeer. I had a 15-year career in marketing director at Moonpig at woolworths.co.uk, and did a stint at the BBC as well. But I got back in touch with my inner entrepreneur whilst I was doing an MBA at Imperial College in London, and we entered a business plan competition. We didn't win that competition, but that didn't matter. What it did was rekindle in me a love of creating businesses from scratch, because I had been a fairly entrepreneurial in early life, but I think school kicked it out of me, to be honest. But I was reminded how much I like creating businesses from scratch. And so I joined a friend I made on the program in his startup. And we took the business from 0 to 3 million turnover in 2 years, which was a roller coaster ride, but I enjoyed it. I then decided to do it all over again with my own business, and that business also grew quickly. To make the most of the opportunity, I had to raise investment. Now, that was the bit I'd never done before, and I made plenty of mistakes and went down blind alleys, the wrong paths, whatever you want to call it. And that's partly why I do what I do now, because I want to make it easier for others the first time you do something. But ultimately, I was successful in raising investment, and I raised 150,000 angel investment, and I went on to do 2 rounds of crowdfunding. I then looked after some of the investments Kelly Hoppen made when she was a dragon on the TV show Dragon's Den. So I've seen investment from both sides of the fence, what it takes to raise investment as a founder, but what early stage investors look for when they back your business. And these days, I run Focus for Business, which is a training and coaching practice designed to make it faster, but also fairer for founders to raise their first or second round of equity funding. And I say fairer because there's a lot of things that get in the way, whether it's gender, only 1% of VC funding went to female founders last year, whether it's ethnicity, the statistics for Black founders raising investment are even worse than female founders. If your business happens to be outside of London, it's harder to raise investment. I mean, these are all bonkers reasons, right, for not raising investment. So I want to level the playing field and make it faster and fairer to raise equity investment. And as Teo said, in the last 12 months, the figure's actually gone up. We've raised 5 million for the businesses that we've worked with. So I want to talk today about a whole range of investment options. And the reason for doing that is because there are different funding routes, depending where you are in your startup journey. And the reason for that is because different investors have different attitudes to risk. So let's talk about risk. Managing your startup, you could say, is like managing risk over time. So that's why I've got these risk and time on the 2 axes. And if you think about the stages you go through in developing your business, there's key stages. You come up with an idea, then you start working on the idea to develop that into a product. When you're clear, and hopefully at the same time as working on your product, you're thinking about who would use my product. So then you start taking your product to market, and you find the right routes and the right customer groups for your product. And then when you've cracked that, you start scaling and growing your business. Those are, if you like, the broad phases of developing a business. And at each of those stages, there's different risk involved. And the risk here is represented by the circles on the screen. The first problem, the first risk, if you like, is overcoming that. Can you find a problem? That's fairly easy. But can you find the right solution to the problem to get to your minimum viable product, your first iteration of your product or service that you're going to provide? From there, you go into this challenge of, can you get the right product market fit? Can you find the right customers for your product or service? And then from there, you go into the sort of scaling challenges of, can you find more marketing channels, more markets, and grow the business further? And broadly, kind of risk is being removed at each of these stages. So as you move from the left-hand side of the screen to the right, risk is gradually being eliminated as you solve each of these challenges around MVP, around customers, and around marketing. And the reason I like to start here when you think about funding is because different investors get involved at different stages. In very broad terms, you may have heard some of these terminologies: pre-seed, seed, early stage, being applied to businesses. And in broad terms, they overlap with these stages of business development that you've got across the top of the screen. But I don't want you to worry too much about these terms. Am I pre-seed or seed or early stage or VC? Because that doesn't matter so much. What I think is more important is understanding where you are in your development journey. So are you at idea stage? Are you in development? Or are you at revenue stage? And to recognize that the different types of investors that exist vary depending on what stage you're at. And again, broadly speaking, there are fewer investors that get involved and in the earlier stages. So there are fewer investors over the left-hand side of the screen than there are over the right. And the amount of money that gets invested at each of these stages tends to be less in those early stages and grow to quite significant sums in the later stages. But make no bones about it, those larger sums are only really being invested when you've started to eliminate risk in your business. So what I wanted to do today, my role, if you like, today is to talk through in a bit more detail some of those investment options that I've shown on this slide. I'm going to talk through the key ones in a bit more detail, giving you the pros and the cons, if you like, of each. But before I do that, and this might be surprising that you find somebody who helps businesses raise investment talking about not raising investment, but that is where I want to start, because you don't have to raise investment. And I have a bit of a bugbear that sort of we kind of start pushing startups down this journey of raising investment, particularly equity investment. It's almost like a badge you have to wear with pride. Oh yeah, I raised investment. Well, you don't have to, all right? And when you start raising investment, you start loosening control on your business, and that isn't right for everybody and not at every stage. So think about bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is when you get a business up and running, you start trading, and the money that you start generating in your business, instead of paying yourself a large salary or hiring a big team, you put it back into the business to start generating more revenue. And you do it in a sort of slower way, an organic way, some would say. But you continue to have control. You're not selling shares in your business. You're not having to pay interest to a bank or whatever. So it's a really interesting place to start, because it puts you in the driving seat and it allows you to build value in your business, to prove there is a business before you maybe go and get other forms of funding down the line. I think one of the reasons people love this is it's seen as the cheapest form of funding, because you're not selling shares and you're not having to pay interest. So it just the opportunity cost of using the money to put back into the business rather than maybe paying yourself a big salary. The downside of bootstrapping is sometimes you don't have the choice. You need a big chunk of money to get your business off the ground, so you can't start trading until you've had investment. And also sometimes bootstrapping can slow you down because you're not generating huge amounts of revenue, so there's not a large amount of spare cash to go back into the business. So other businesses that have taken investment might have deeper pockets. They might be able to spend more money. So you have to bear that in mind. But I did want to put it out there that you don't have to raise investment. You can start trading and grow your business that way. Next up, I want to talk about grant funding, because this can be a really good place to start a business, particularly if you're doing something innovative and different. So grant funding is typically money that comes from often a government source or a government bank. It could be a charity, but they're putting the money into your business because they want to see it get off the ground. It's not a loan, so you don't have to pay it back with interest, and you're not selling shares. Typically, it might be around, as I say, innovation. There are lots of grants from Innovate UK that are about innovation. It might be about economic development. So if there's a geographic region that is not very well served or is struggling in the current economic climate, you might get a grant because of where you live and creating jobs in an area. And sometimes it is about criteria, quotas, change that decision makers want to see in the world. So there can be grants for female founders, Black founders, outside London businesses, things where you want to see change happen in the way we do things. I like grant funding because it is a great way of getting free money, in a way, to get to proof of concept, to get to proof that there is a business, particularly if you have to spend money on tech or innovation. Grant funding, when you secure it, also speaks about you and what you're trying to do. It raises your profile. It's a confidence boost in that, somebody else is interested in what you're doing and believes in the direction you're taking, to the extent that they're willing to put grant funding behind it. And often grant funding comes with mentoring and coaching that allows you to develop your thinking further than perhaps you would had you been left on your own. So lots of reasons why it's really good. However, it is massively competitive. So don't go into this sort of thinking, oh, free money, walk in the park. Go into it with your eyes open and check out the criteria for awarding the grant funding before you even apply. Don't waste time applying for something that you're not eligible for, because you just won't get it. Grant funding has to be delivered in very specific areas. It is very competitive, and you'll find that it's probably quite a time-consuming application process. So leave time to do it. Don't leave it until the hour before the deadline, because you may need to gather some statistics and build a business case around why the grant funding should be provided. And make sure when you're thinking about the criteria for the grant that you're covering each of those elements of the criteria in your application. Don't get sort of distracted and talk about what you want to talk about. Talk about the things they need to hear in order to be able to award you the money. The other challenge that sometimes comes with grant funding is you have to get matched funding. So maybe if you get a government grant for 100,000, they'll say you also need to get 100,000 equity investment from investors. And so sometimes you think, whoopee, I've got it, I've got the grant funding. And then you think, oh, there's still so much more work to do to get the other matched funding. And they won't release the grant funding until you've got the matched funding. So you have to be aware of all of the issues around grant funding. And there can sometimes be strings attached. There's always going to be reporting. So leave time in your working day to provide the reports that will be required of the grant body to show how you've used the funding. But sometimes there can be other things you need to be aware of, like it might be able to convert, the grant might convert into equity down the line, and you need to be comfortable if that's the case. So eyes open, but a really good way of getting things off the ground. Next up is friends and family. And, this is a tricky one, isn't it? Because we don't all have a high network or a network of high net worth individuals, people who can back us with large sums of money. But one thing I would ask you to think about is, friends and family money doesn't need to be large amounts of money, and it can come in a variety of forms. It could come as a loan, so you're borrowing the money for a year to get the business off the ground, and then you're going to give it back with or without interest. So there's different ways in which you can do friends and family money, and it doesn't necessarily need to be huge amounts. As I say, work out how much you need and take it from there. Again, friends and family money is an endorsement. It's an endorsement, though, not so much of your business. Often it's about you. People are backing you because they know who you are, the time and effort you're putting into your business, the knowledge you have and that you've acquired over time and that will be relevant to the business, and your passion and commitment to see the business happen. Those are about backing you. So it's slightly different to a sort of professional investor who will look at the business opportunity, assess that, and then back you because of their assessment of the business opportunity. Both are valid, but you need to be aware of the distinction. The big challenge I always have with friends and family money, apart from the fact that we don't all have networks of high net worth individuals, but the other challenge I have is, should you mix business and pleasure? Do you want your friends and family lending money when it is a very risky area, backing early stage businesses. 9 out of 10 businesses will fail. So anyone who invests in your business must understand they could lose that money, and that they can't just get it back tomorrow whenever they decide they need that money. You know, it may be quite a long time that they are lending you the money for. I think a salutary tale here, I have one of my investor friends who, before he was an investor, he was a founder himself, and his father backed his initial business, and that business folded, and quite a lot of money was lost by the father. And there was so much bad blood that the father very nearly didn't come to his son's wedding. So this is the salutary tale. Be clear with people. If they back your business, they must understand the risk they're taking. But it can be a good way to get things up and running to start with. Next up, it's worth talking about R&D tax credits. And this really, there's different types of things here. Typically, the R&D tax credits are rewarding you for innovative or developmental behavior. So this isn't real money in that you don't get a cash of money into the bank. You actually have to prove that you have spent money on research and development before you, and then you make an application to get some of that money back. And so you have to provide a lot of paperwork, receipts and evidence that you've spent the money, and then you may get a proportion of that money back. Sometimes it's as cash, but sometimes it's in other forms. It might be money off, for example, employment costs or something like that. So it isn't always cash, but it's useful, especially if you are a very technology-led or innovative-led business, and you can prove that you are researching and bringing new thought into the work you are doing. You could then qualify for an R&D tax credit. There's different sorts of schemes, and I'm not an expert, and we don't have time today to go into all the detailed schemes, but I want you to understand that it's about, if you're spending money on research and development, you may be able to get that money back. But keep good records, because if you can't evidence what you've spent, you can't get it back. Next up, I was going to talk about loans. Now, typically, your average bank requires to see usually a year or 2 years audited accounts before you can get a loan from them. So for most startups, the typical ordinary bank loan is not really available to you at the point at which you start. You need to have traded for a few years before you can access a bank loan. But there are some very specialist loans around, such as startup loans, which do allow you to access some cash. Not necessarily huge amounts, but you can get it very early in your journey. The startup loan, for example, allows you to access £25,000 per director in the business. But be clear, you are accessing that as an individual. So it is an individual loan for use in your business. So it is looking at your individual your individual credit rating, and then judging whether you're appropriate to lend the money to, and the money has to be spent in your business, not on your own desires. You can't go and buy a car or a house or whatever you may think you could put the money towards. It's got to be used in the business. They're really useful for certain types of businesses where you can get to revenue pretty quickly with a relatively small cash injection. So I don't know, if you've developed a product and you want to start selling it, but you just need a loan to prepare some stock, then that could be an option for you, and so long as you can quickly sell that stock and start paying back the interest on the loan. That's an example of where you could use it. The other reason I like it is they get you thinking about what you've got to do. So you'll have to write a business plan to show how you're going to use the money. And sometimes it comes with mentoring support as well. So you get help for that journey of preparing the business plan and then accessing and using the cash. This really is best for proven business models where you can very quickly and with a high degree of certainty get to revenue. It's not really for the innovative, we're not really sure how we take this to market type business. And as I say, it's relatively small amounts of money. So it's not the right thing for everybody. Worth now, I think, talking about business angels. What is a business angel? Business angel is perhaps best represented by what you see on the telly when you watch Dragon's Den or Shark Tank. So So they're high net worth individuals, people who have perhaps made their money by running and then selling their business, and they've now got more money than they need for their own personal use. So they reinvest some of that money into other businesses in order to make a commercial return. And this is the important thing. This is not philanthropy. People are not going to back you just because they like what you're doing. They need to be able to see they're going to get a commercial return on their investment. Typically, an angel is looking to get a 10 times return on their investment over maybe 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, something like that. I really like angel investors, and they play a really important role in in a sort of early stage but scalable business. And the reason I like them is they bring not just their cash, but their skills and their experience. They've run businesses, so their business knowledge can be really useful when applied to your business. They have sector skills, so they might know your sector inside out and be able to give you good strategic advice, but they also have contact books to die for. So, you know, if they could introduce you to the head of Sainsbury's and you could get in and start trading at Sainsbury's, that could fundamentally change your business model far quicker than just the cash alone, for example. Or similarly, if they can secure you a partnership with a really good tech platform, for example, and that gives you access to the tech you need or the market you're looking to reach out to, they bring more than their cash. That's the point. And they're often quite hands-on, and so they almost become part of your team. They spend time with you, they give you good advice, they understand the journey you're on, and they contribute to that journey. But angel investors are not easy to find. Funnily enough, they don't really advertise their presence, not the serious ones anyway. If you find somebody on LinkedIn with angel investor in their title, I'm always slightly cynical about whether they're still investing or whether they're building their profile in some other way. And this isn't kind of a quick route to market. A, you've got to find the angel investor, and then B, you've got to build a relationship with them so they understand what your business is doing and the journey you want to go on, and so that you also understand whether you want to go on that journey with that angel investor. They're going to be with you for a while. You need to see it as kind of building almost like a marriage relationship. You want somebody who your objectives are aligned, your approach to the journey is aligned, because you're going to be traveling on that journey together for a long time. And investors, as I said, will be hands-on, so they'll have a view on how you run your business, so you need to be open to feedback too, and not everybody likes that, do they? But they can provide a really good source of early stage funding, but you will need to provide them with an exit. And by an exit, we're usually talking about a trade sale. So the point where you've grown your business to such an extent that another business wants to back your business in order to add it into their business. That allows an investor to sell their shares, hopefully at a higher price than they originally paid for them, and to get that return that they're looking for. It doesn't necessarily mean that you as a founder have to sell your shares. You might well go on the journey with the new organization, but you do need to give your investors a chance to get their exit and their return. So it's a journey. The minute you start taking angel investment, you're on a journey. Worth popping in and talking about crowdfunding here. You've got different sorts of crowdfunding. I'm not really going to talk about charitable crowdfunding today. I think we all kind of get that. There's two sorts that are perhaps useful from a business perspective. One is reward-based crowdfunding, business platforms like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, where you can raise relatively small amounts of money, perhaps by pre-selling a product or pre-selling the idea to somebody of what it is you're going to create when you've got the cash. And people look at what you're saying, and either they like what you're doing and they might choose to back you with a sum of money and get something in return, usually something in kind, perhaps the first person to get the product once you've made it. And so it's a useful way, as I say, of testing a market or pre-selling a product. The other type of crowdfunding is equity crowdfunding, where you're selling shares in your business, and that's platforms like Crowdcube and Seedrs. And again, a really useful way to get some early stage cash once you know the direction your business is going to take. What I would say about crowdfunding is it is not a walk in the park. You do need to bring about 60% of your crowdfunding target to the platform. And that isn't always immediately obvious when you see somebody raise £1 million on Crowdcube in 90 seconds, which is, I think, the record so far. You kind of think, oh, wow, where did all those people come from? Well, there's been a large amount of work going on for months previously behind the scenes in order to make something like that happen. So you do have to bring your investors to the table. And so it's not the quick win it might appear. Next, I was going to talk about venture capital. For most early stage businesses, venture capital is not appropriate until you have been trading for a number of years. VC, or venture capital, are rather like supercharged angels. They are people who commit sums of money to businesses that are proven, are on the journey of growing. However, unlike angels, they are not investing their own money. They are investing other people's money. So they have created a fund which lots of people have put money into. Some of those might be individuals, but more likely they're institutions, pension funds, corporates have spare cash and want to use that cash to make more cash. So they back a venture capital fund, and the venture capital fund then have to manage the deployment of those funds over a defined period of time, usually sort of 7 years, 5 to 7 years, in order to return a significant return to their investors. And if angels are looking to get a 10 times return, a VC is probably looking for something like 25 to 35 times return. So they're looking for a very particular sort of business, a business that is going to grow very quickly, very fast, exponentially fast, right? So it's not a journey for everyone, because the sort of effort that goes into growing exponentially is immense. It's sweat, blood, and tears. It's hard work. It's stress. It's an amazing journey, and it can deliver some amazing things on that journey, but you've got to be up for the journey, and it isn't for everybody. So that's the first thing to say about VC. But they bring significant sums of money once you are once you have proven the business. So once you've got revenue, typically, you know, an angel, a VC might look for monthly recurring revenue of maybe 20,000 or annual recurring revenue of 100, 200,000. The numbers are always shifting slightly as VC's attitudes to risk change, but that's the sort of point at which you would start looking at VC funding. There are a number of VCs who call themselves early stage funds and may back pre-revenue businesses, but it is pretty hard for a VC to back a pre-revenue business. They're really looking for proof in the form of existing revenue. So pinch of salt when a VC says, oh, yeah, we back pre-revenue businesses. Ask them how many pre-revenue businesses have they backed in the last 6 months or 12 months and see what they say then. Couple of downsides to VC, apart from the fact that it's a serious scale-up journey you're going on. VCs have far more negotiating power, and so you are really losing some control over your business when you take on VC funding. Now, hopefully that's okay, because you're all going on the scale-up journey together and you don't mind, you're agreed on the direction. But if you're somebody who is wanting to hold all the equity, all the shares in their business, VC funding is not going to be for you. And the other thing to note is the VCs, because they have this fund and they need to deliver a return across the fund, they manage this on a portfolio basis. That means if after a few months it's really clear your business is not going to deliver the level of return an investor wants, they'll probably just drop you. They'll stop talking to you, stop responding to your emails, and you can feel very, very isolated. If you're doing really well, they'll support you 100%, but if you're not, it can feel very painful. So again, eyes open as you go into that. So that was my whistle-stop tour. I think I've almost done it in the time available, Bucky. A whistle-stop tour of finding the right investor. And as you can see, there isn't a right answer. The right investor is going to be different for each of you, depending on the stage of development that you're at with your business right now, depending on the journey that you want to go on with your business in terms of speed of growth and objectives for the business, and in terms of the amount of money you may need. You wouldn't go to a VC for 20K, for example. You go to a VC for millions, but you might go to a startup loan company for 20K. So the right investor will depend on you, where you are, and where you want to go on the journey.